Yes, Rangu?
Swami, Swami,
Yes.
just wanted to say I'm glad to see you.
Thank you.
Tell Nicole I'm glad to see her and I hope everything's okay.
All right. Who are we talking about? You're breaking in and out.
Did you hear me?
No, I didn't. It was breaking in
Are
and
you
out.
able to hear me? Are you able to hear me? I don't know why I
Yeah,
have this
yes,
problem.
now I
It's
can
just
hear you.
okay. I just wanted to say that I'm glad to see Nicole and I hope everything's okay.
Ah, yes. Yes, indeed.
Oh, thank you. Yes, everything's
Thank
fine.
you.
Thank
She's
you.
battened down and taken refuge in another home, and the hurricane's on the,
Ah,
but it won't be. It's changing course a little bit. Apparently, I'm telling you everything she just told me. So she's the
mm.
expert behind the dummy. But yeah, this way they really won't know until the morning probably as to where it's going to hit or how bad it's going to hit.
I
But
think we'll be okay.
Well, I'll be praying, Swami.
yes, indeed.
Bye.
All
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't mean bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
all right. So we are on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We're beginning chapter 18, M at Dakshineshwar, part 2. And it's December 26th, 1883. And I was going to try and get away without glasses, but it's not working. Sri Ramakrishna, accompanied by Manilal Malik, M, and several other devotees, was in a carriage on his way to Ram's new garden. The garden, which Ram had recently purchased, was next to Surendra's. Ram adored the master as an incarnation of God. He visited Sri Ramakrishna frequently at Dakshineshwar. Manilal Malik was a member of the Brahmo Samaj. The Brahmos did not believe in divine incarnations. Master to Manilal. In order to meditate on God, one should try at first to think of him as free from upadis or limitations. God is beyond upadis. He is beyond speech and beyond mind. But it is very difficult to achieve perfection in this form of meditation. But it is easy to meditate on an incarnation. God born as man. Yes, God in man. The body is a mere covering. It is like a lantern with a light burning inside, or like a glass case in which one sees precious things. Arriving at the garden, the master got out of the carriage and accompanied Ram and the other devotees to the sacred Tulsi grove. Standing near it, he said, "How nice! It is a fine place. You can easily meditate on God here." So let's look at that. It's a little bit of what we were talking about earlier. Just this notion that that God is. You think of God, but really, I would say that in setting up a practice with somebody, understand initially that we don't have any idea what God is. We talk a lot about believing in God or being offended by God or not liking the idea of God. And really, what we probably should be conversing more about is what is God? How do we think on that? Because we may be disagreeing or disliking something we've been told about God that may utterly not be true. We may have thought of God in a way that we were raised to think about God, and God may be very different from that. Well, certainly would at least be very different from that. And so maybe the question more these days isn't so much of whether we believe in God or not, which is really a moot point. Who cares whether you believe in God or not? That's not going to make a difference. But really, what is the divine? I know in my case that I was raised very much with an anthropomorphic idea of God who was keeping track, like Santa Claus, of all the naughties and nice things that I did, and was a God that had emotions. He could get angry and he could burn people up on the spot, and he could be jealous. He was allowed to have all the passions that he forbade the rest of us from having. And, as I grew older and as I moved out into the world and found people who were a lot more convincing in their relationship with God for me at the time, who spoke in much deeper ways about God, and who had lives that were much more deeply in alignment with the idea of divinity, of God. And I began to hear what they had to say. My idea of God radically changed, has radically changed, and has opened a lot of doors. If I had tried to go in through my idea of God that I had, 35 years ago, I don't think it didn't get me anywhere. Let's just put it that way. It didn't get me anywhere. Life was quite a struggle, and things were not getting better. And the things that I knew were wrong that I was trying to correct were not changing. No matter how much time and energy I forced myself to deal with them over, it was not with any success. And that has radically changed. And so I don't like the idea of abandoning God, completely. I think it's more of a wrestling with what that means, and coming up with a workable ideal within for us. And so we shouldn't be afraid of God. Of the idea of God. We shouldn't be afraid of the idea of an incarnation. I think the way, as Thakur says here, it's easy to meditate on an incarnation. That ideal we'll find there. The ideal's not hard to find. I mean, you read the life of any of the great incarnations, Ram, or Shiva, even a deity, but Ramakrishna and Krishna and Chaitanya, Buddha, Jesus. You read about those lives, you're going to fall in love with that person, because they are the clearest and purest manifestation of love that we can encounter. And so and I'm still holding on to that as being the best way to reach God, because that's what Ramakrishna taught. And just from my own experiments with it, there were periods in my sadhana where I abandoned the idea of God as a person, or God as a friend, and tried to go much more just pure philosophy, pure practice, pure Advaita. And I have to say that didn't work. I tried it for a few months, and I found that bliss inside really drying up, wasn't being replenished. And so I abandoned that and went back and grabbed Thakur and said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to leave you standing there, in that ideal." So, I think there's a reason that the beloved is still incarnating and still coming, and still talking of love, and primarily of love. I think when Vivekananda came here, this is not going to be teaching what I'm saying here, because who can say? I don't know that I can say this with any authority. But he didn't talk about Ramakrishna and an incarnation because he wasn't coming to preach a change in religion for the West. He didn't come to say, now everybody, here is the new incarnation. Jesus is out, Ramakrishna is in. This is the latest and greatest. Let's go forward with this, which is how the Westerners would have taken it, because that's how we have been that's how we've been. The worldview we've been growing up with in this country, and it's the way that the majority religion, the Christians, present their religion, present their ideal in a way, so that if they would never be able to conceive of, oh, this is Ramakrishna, and Jesus and Ramakrishna are the same thing, and you can sit and worship either one of them. The Christians, and I'm actually writing back and forth, probably in a silly way, with someone who's challenging me with that online right now, that Jesus is the only way. And because it's starting to happen more and more often, I'm starting to think that maybe we need to engage with that conversation. But, so I think that's where Thakur is pushing us even now, to find an ideal. That's the first. We can't move toward a perfection if we don't have an idea of perfection, if we don't have an ideal, if we don't know where we're going. There's no way to become who we are if we don't know who we are. And so those are the first questions, before the deeper intricacies of practice. It's really, first of all, being taught that our nature is divine. And what does that mean? And that God is God. And what does that mean? In a way that isn't childish, that isn't, fairy tale-ish in its approach, getting down to some of the bits of philosophy, and start there for our journey forward, because that will make things a lot easier. That'll give us a frame of reference and a set of principles, and then we can kind of go forward with things. All right. Sri Ramakrishna sat down in the house which stood at the south of the lake. Ram offered him a plate of fruit and sweets, which he enjoyed with the devotees, and after a short time he went around the garden. Next, Sri Ramakrishna proceeded toward Surendra's garden. He walked on foot a little distance and saw a sadhu sitting on a couch under a tree. At once, he went up to the holy man and joyfully began to converse with him. Master, to which order of monks do you belong? Have you any title, Giri, Puri, or the like? Sadhu, people call me a Paramahamsa. Master, oh, that is good. I am Shiva. That is a good attitude. I must tell you something else. The process of creation, preservation, and destruction that is going on day and night is due to Shakti, the power of God. This primal power and Brahman, they're one and the same. Shakti cannot exist without Brahman, just as the waves cannot exist without water. There cannot be any instrumental music without an instrument. As long as God keeps us in his relative world, so long as we feel that we are two, if one accepts Shakti, one accepts Brahman as well. If one is aware of night, one is also aware of day. If one is aware of knowledge, one is also aware of ignorance. But there is another state in which God reveals to his devotee that Brahman is beyond both knowledge and ignorance. It cannot be described in words. What exists, exists. And this is that wonderful notion. I can't help, I'm kind of framing everything sort of in reference to that question you gave me, Bindu. I'm just running with it because I'm assuming Mother's kind of put me there. But, even in what he's talking here, this is a good idea to see this distinction and understand it, that if we do have that storybook version of God, that can be the incarnation within Shakti, within the changing world. And then we can satisfy that intellectual side of us, that side that's afraid of being sentimental or touchy-feely in our practice, with the idea of Brahman as the perfect noun of the ideal. And the ideal is pure love, pure wisdom, through pure existence, through pure being, in the moment alone. And so that gives us both sides to work with. And I think that Thakur was leaning in that direction when he was talking about this idea of jnana bhakti, where we think of God philosophically to deal with Brahman in order to kind of clear out the sentimentality and the emotional stuff that might be clogging some of our arteries from our upbringing, from our wrong thinking about it. And so we can really hold both of them. It doesn't have to be an either or. That incarnation can always be a subset of the absolute unchanging. And that absolute unchanging is our pure awareness. And it's just difficult, without having done quite a bit of inner practice, to be aware of your awareness is almost nonsensical. There's just no idea of what that is in there, because it's really just a pancake batter of mixture inside. We don't know where the self is. We don't know what it is. We don't know where our thoughts are, what our mind is, what the relationship between all those things are. And so we've got quite a soup going on inside. And so I think this idea of Brahman here helps us clear out the soup, or at least clear out turn the broth clear maybe, but that the incarnation allows us to actually move in that direction. You know, the power of the incarnation really does make us or help us transcend inside. That's the power that's in the incarnation. And why, even after, 2,000 years, the name of Jesus is still transforming people. The name of Buddha, after even, 2,500 years, is still transforming people. And so Ramakrishna now, also his name is added to that list. These are the power of God, is God's rope to us, is her incarnation. And so we should, use that. And then the part of us that's more comfortable with the philosophy, do that under the guise of Brahman, or under the under the roof of Brahman, as it were. All right. As long as God keeps us in his relative world, so long we feel that there are two. If one accepts Shakti, one accepts Brahman. If one is aware of night, then one is aware of day, aware of knowledge, then you're aware of ignorance. But there is another state in which God reveals to his devotee that Brahman is beyond both knowledge and ignorance. It cannot be described in words. What exists, exists. After a pleasant conversation with the sadhu, the master returned to the carriage, the holy man walking with him. Sri Ramakrishna looked upon him as a friend of long acquaintance, and they walked arm in arm. Again, this is a vision of what it is to be almost egoless. You get two almost egoless people, and they talk to each other for 5 minutes, and they're walking arm in arm, feeling like they've known each other forever. Because they know that oneness, they know that sameness, they know that they're not different, that it's just the contents of mind that are different, and those have nothing to do with them as people. The master arrived at Surendra's garden, and the very first thing he talked about was the sadhu. Master, he's a very nice man. To Ram, bring him to Dakshineshwar when you come. He is really a good man. There is a line in a song to the effect that a man cannot recognize a holy person unless he himself is holy. The sadhu believes in God with form. That is good. God is both formless and endowed with form. He is many things more. The absolute and the relative belong to one and the same reality. What is beyond speech and mind is born in the flesh, assuming various forms and engaging in various activities. From that one Om have sprung Om Shiva, Om Kali, and Om Krishna. Suppose the master of a house has sent out a small boy of the family to invite people to a feast. All look on the boy with great fondness and affection because he is the son or grandson of a prominent man. The master took refreshments at Surendra's garden house and then set out to Dakshineshwar with the devotees. So just this liberality that Thakur, it allowed him to accept everybody, to be intimate with everybody. He didn't feel the need to press against anybody's orientation or their spiritual package, as it were, for where they were in life. Thursday, December 27th, 1883. The temple garden was filled with the sweet music of the dawn service, which mingled with the morning melody from the Nahabat. Leaving his bed, Sri Ramakrishna chanted the names of God in sweet tones. Then he bowed before the pictures of different deities in his room and went to the west porch to salute the Ganges. Some of the devotees who had spent the night at the temple garden came to the master's room and bowed before him. Rakal was staying with the master, and Baburam had come the previous evening. M had been staying there for 2 weeks. Sri Ramakrishna said to M, I have been invited to Ishan's this morning. Baburam will accompany me, and you too. M made ready to go with the master. This is just that living out. Again, I'm going to remind us, that one of the things Ramakrishna says is very helpful and imperative to our spiritual development is taking time every now and then and going away for a day or two without your phones and your computers, families and friends, just going somewhere just to spend that time with God and God alone. And you see him now here surrounded by his devotees doing that, coming and spending a whole week, and some of them coming the night before, spending the night, and at least coming and spending the day with Ramakrishna, And so for us to do that's very important. Ramakrishna says to do that regularly. And it's something that I think we all kind of forget as we get into our busy lives. We don't get that time. At 8 o'clock, the carriage hired for the master stood waiting in front of the Nahabat. On all sides, plants and trees were in flower, and the river sparkled in the sunlight of the bright winter day. The master bowed once more before the pictures. Then, still chanting the names of the Divine Mother, he got into the carriage, followed by M and Babaram. The devotees took with them Sri Ramakrishna's woolen shawl, his woolen cap, and a small bag of spices. Sri Ramakrishna was very happy during the trip, and he enjoyed it like a child. About 9 o'clock, the carriage stopped at the door of Ishan's house. Ishan and his relatives greeted the master and led him to the parlor on the first floor. Shrish, Ishan's son, was introduced to Sri Ramakrishna. The young man practiced law at Alipur. He had been a brilliant student, having stood first in 2 of the university examinations, but he was also extremely modest. Master to Shrish, what is your profession? Shrish, oh, I'm practicing law at Alipur. Master to M, oh, for such a man to be a lawyer. To Shrish, well, have you any questions to ask? Perhaps you want to know how to live unattached in the world? Isn't that so? Shrish, under the pressure of duties, people do many unrighteous things in the world. Further, some are engaged in good work and some in evil. Is this due to their actions in previous births? Is that why they act this way? Master, how long should a man perform his duties? Oh, as long as he has not attained God. Duties drop away after the realization of God. Then one goes beyond good and evil. The flower drops off as soon as the fruit appears. The flower serves the purpose of begetting the fruit. How long should a devotee perform daily devotion, such as the Sandhya? As long as his hair does not stand on end, and his eyes do not shed tears at the name of God. These things indicate that a devotee has realized God. From these, one knows that he has attained pure love of God. Realizing God goes beyond virtue and vice. Right? So how long do we have to, do our meditations, do our pujas, go to holy places, hang out with holy company? As long as you do not shed tears at the mention of the name of God, this doesn't mean like after a good hour of kirtan and then start shedding tears. This means like right now when I say Ramakrishna or Jesus, that the hair is not standing up like, ooh, foo, yes, that devotion is ripe and ready and just below the surface, waiting for the slightest reminder. And then suddenly we're just taken into it, right? And as long as as long as one's hair does not stand on end and one's eyes do not shed tears at the name of God, right? These indicate a deep feeling, a deep knowledge of the presence, right? That the body, the thrill goes through the body at the thought of God. At that point, we can break free from some of these practices that we might feel are remedial, but really are not. They're just a key. Keys are never advanced or remedial. They're just keys. Realizing God goes beyond virtue and vice. He sings, I bow my head, says Prasad, before desire and liberation, knowing the secret that Kali is one with the highest Brahman. I have discarded once for all both righteousness and sin. Yes, this is realization. That's when you've discarded the duality, when you have united your ego with the divine, or dissolved your ego into the divine, as you like. But it means that knowledge of the good and evil, that that disease that we caught from eating ego, eating the fruit of ego in the Garden of our Eden. That at that time we became separate, and that's when we became aware of God's will and our will, or good and evil. That's when everything took two sides, our side in the universe of objects and God's side in that open inner peace. He says, the more you advance toward God, the less he will give you worldly duties to perform. Shrish, it is extremely difficult to proceed toward God while leading the life of a householder. Master, all right, here we go. Master says, why so? What about the yoga of practice? At Karmarpur, I have seen the women of carpenter families selling flattened rice. Let me tell you how alert they are while doing their business. The pestle of the husking machine that flattens the paddy constantly falls into the hole of the mortar. The woman turns the paddy in the hole with one hand, and with the other holds her baby on her lap as she nurses it. In the meantime, customers arrive. The machine goes on pounding the paddy, and she carries on her bargains with the customers. She says to them, pay the few pennies you owe me before you take anything more. You see, she has all these things to do at the same time. Nurse the baby, turn the paddy as the pestle pounds it, take the flattened rice out of the hole, and talk to the buyers. This is called the yoga of practice. 15 parts of her mind out of 16 are fixed on the pestle and the husking machine, lest it should pound her hand. With only one part of her mind, she nurses the baby and talks to the buyers. Likewise, he who leads the life of a householder should devote 15 parts of his mind to God. Otherwise, he will face ruin and fall into the clutches of death. He should perform the duties of the world with only a part of his mind. A man may lead the life of a householder after attaining knowledge, but he must attain knowledge first. If the milk of the mind is kept in the water of the world, they get mixed. Therefore, he should turn the milk into curd and extract butter from it by churning it in solitude. Then he may keep the butter in the water of the world. Therefore, you see, spiritual discipline is necessary. When the aswata tree is a mere sapling, it must be enclosed by a fence. Otherwise, the cattle will eat it. But the fence may be taken away when the trunk grows thick and strong. Then even an elephant, tied to the tree, cannot harm it. Therefore, at the beginning, the aspirant should go into solitude now and then. Spiritual discipline is necessary. Oh, I said that twice in 2 paragraphs. Spiritual discipline is necessary. You want to eat rice? Suppose you sit down somewhere and say, wood contains fire and fire cooks rice. Can saying it cook the rice? You must get 2 pieces of wood by rubbing them together to bring out the fire. Right? And this is a very important point, and this is kind of where I was going with that idea of when we start into spiritual life, there's some real remedial things that we have to get together that unfortunately I really didn't understand that at all in my first 20 years. Didn't quite get that. But this notion of when he says, you can't just say, oh, well, there's fire in wood and wood boils water, or fire boils water and water cooks the rice, and then expect there to be rice, cooked and ready to eat. You have to know what these things mean, and you have to know how to use them. And so like this example I've been using lately that I've been really working through and have been so immensely enriched from these practices and these experiments with determining the boundaries of body-mind in my inner world, to understand this. I've been told for 25 years that I'm not the body and I'm not the mind. It never occurred to me to ask, what does that mean? It's easily answered in a philosophical sense. It's easy to say, oh, I'm not that or I'm not that. But to have an idea of what you're actually saying is quite different. And so it's what he's saying here. He's saying when you hear these spiritual truths, don't just think because you can regurgitate them or you can repeat them back. Don't think that you've done it. That's not going to give you the food. The food is now taking this truth and going inside and seeing it for yourself. Practicing, grab those 2 pieces of wood and start rubbing them together and get the fire. Oh, I've got the fire. Okay, well, now get the water. Okay, now put the water on it. Get that boiling. All right, now put some rice in there. Now we're in business, right? And so this time that we spend doing our practice, sometimes I know for myself it gets quite rote. We sit down and we just do our japa one after the other, set our timer, get it done 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever we're doing. And it becomes a very much sort of a thing that we do. And when that hour is up, then we set it down and poof, now we can get on with the rest of our day kind of feeling. And that's good. That's wonderful. But if that's not producing a sense of bliss in you, if it's not giving you the sense of charging a battery that gives you a joyful or a positive outlook for what comes next, if it doesn't carry out into the world as just a small song in the back of your mind about the nature of things, that's not what we're going for. We want this to be part and parcel of the way we experience the world. Learning that we're not the body and mind should radically alter the way we approach the world. How does spirit approach something that it is that's not body mind? How does this change us inside, knowing that we're not body and that we're not mind? Right. Well, it takes off the urgency of desire quite a bit. It sets that just across the table, so we have to reach for it. When you think you're the body and mind, your desires they're right there. The coffee cup's in your hand, the knife's in your hand. There's no separation. But when you know I'm not body and I'm not mind, well, that takes all of your desires and sets them on the other side of the table. You're not those things. They're not immediate. It's not you wanting pizza. It's not you wanting enjoyment and pleasure. That it's a movement of the body or it's a movement of the mind. And to see that clearly, that's our practice. That's the rubbing the two sticks together. Sitting there and practicing, looking at it inside. Can I see that I'm not the body? Can I really go there and not be the body? Can I see that I'm not the mind? Can I really camp there? Can I sit where I am and not use the mind, not use the body, not even hear them, not even answer their calls, not even recognize them as being my own? Can I do that? What happens then? How do I get there? And you go inside to answer these questions. You go in there and you try them. And when you fail, you sit there and think, what caused that failure? Why is that there? Why didn't that happen? Why couldn't I be quiet? And all these things start to come to you from within you. That's what the disciples were talking about when they said they wanted to make it their own. It means take the teachings of these great ones and make it so that you could teach them yourself, not by mimicking them or parroting them, but by going inside and sitting in the middle of your work that has taught you and shown you these things yourself. And then you can talk about them in a much deeper way, a much more meaningful way, and find yourself going forward, even though you are not the one going forward anymore. You're just doing your work. So spiritual discipline is necessary, and a real discipline. Really think about what you're doing in your practice and focus on that. Learn, expose yourself to God. Take that notion of love, really investigate that. Love that God is everywhere present at this moment. Really put your mind there, really open to that, until you can see it, you can experience it. Right? You feel some bliss, you feel some quiet, you feel some peace. These are the things that you feel in the presence of these seers, these holy people. And they're what we are able to feel when we are inside our own self. We have the original temple right here. We have the original temple with the original deity, the one without a second. And it follows us everywhere during the day. And so rubbing sticks together is sitting in that temple and watching the world from there. Because if you watch the world from there, you won't forget, you won't get caught, you won't get stuck. Right? And so that's what we want to know first. We need to know those two things as we start out. What am I in reality? And what is God in reality? And is there a difference? That's not up front, though. That comes later. But initially, just who am I? And that Satchitananda is very important, because that's where all of the rest of our practice comes from. It comes from the knowledge of Satchitananda, right? If we have that constant awareness of the presence of that beloved Satchitananda within, and we know that if we act according to that impetus, according to that inspiration, that life will be a great joy. Life will be a light. And when we let go of that and start acting from a desire, then we're no longer acting from Satchitananda. We're now acting from body, or we're acting from mind. And that's always going to have an object in mind, always going to have a goal in mind, always going to have a method in mind, a cause and effect in mind. And we're trying to transcend that. We're trying to come into an isness, bringing it closer to a point, right? To talk about being in the present, it's been thrown around so much in popular culture that it doesn't seem like a profound thing. But to actually be in the moment means to have no story that you're standing on to look at the moment, so that nothing is coloring your vision of the moment, right? If you have an idea of the moment, if you have an idea of what it is or where it is, then know you're being informed by mind. You're not being present and letting the moment itself manifest itself to you. You're still in mind and listening to what the mind is saying about the moment. Letting the mind describe to you what the moment is. Letting the mind describe to you what you are, right? And so it always puts it in past, present, future. It always uses time, space, and causation. But as long as those things are being employed, we're not present. And that's in the absolute sense. That's in the highest sense. In the practice sense, just being aware of the presence of the divine is being in the present moment, because that will get us there. That will help us purify. It's really impossible to be present until the mind is pure, because we just operate from the past. We always have. Ego is composed entirely of the past, entirely of our experiences, our memories. And so if it's standing on memories and experiences, then it's not standing on the present, right? It's standing just one frame back, looking at the present and having the mind define that for them, right? If you're present, if you can actually be present, you won't see movement in a movie, right? If you watch a movie and you're perfectly in the present, it won't move. You'll see one still picture, you'll see the next still picture. The thing that makes it move is that you stand on the previous picture and look at the present picture, and the mind then explains the difference to you. And that creates movement, that creates story. And that's what happens to us. We stand outside the moment, which is all artificial, of course. We can't stand outside of it in reality, but that's what we're working toward, seeing things as they are, and not seeing them as the mind has told us that they are, or is telling us that they are. That's a very difficult thing to do, to be present at that degree, because in that present, in the real present, everything is spontaneous. Nothing is calculated or planned. Everything is spontaneous. Wisdom, love, action, thoughts, everything is spontaneous in the moment. By eating siddhi, one becomes intoxicated and feels happy. But suppose you haven't eaten the stuff or done anything else with it. You simply sit down somewhere and mutter, siddhi, siddhi. Will that intoxicate you or make you happy? Sitting there saying, pot, pot, marijuana, marijuana. That's not going to do it. Just talking about these great things, just repeating these great things, that's part of practice. It's all very important, but it's not the thing itself. So we shouldn't ever be content until we know the thing itself. Yeah. And to the degree that we have the thing itself, to that degree we'll be content. So that's a safe thing to say, I suppose. Yeah. You can have contentment without realization, but it's done through faith in grace. You see, it's faith in grace that allows us to enjoy things that we have not attained as such. It allows us to enjoy the unconditioned love of God, even though that's still really conceptual to us. It allows us to enjoy the present of spirit, even though we're not really quite aware of that yet. So we can taste all of these things through faith, and even have them through grace if we can actually really grab onto grace. That's what Mother has in mind when she says you can have your realization this moment if you want it. It's available through grace in this moment. But remember, to make room for infinite grace, you have to get rid of egoism. You have to have infinite humility. Otherwise, you have nowhere to put the grace. You may learn a great deal from books, but it is all futile if you have no love for God and no desire to realize him. A mere pundit without discernment and renunciation has his attention fixed on lust and greed. The vulture soars very high, but its eyes are always fixed on the charnel pit. That alone is knowledge through which one is able to know God. All else is futile. Well, what is your idea about God? Shrish. Well, sir, I feel that there is an all-knowing person. We get an indication of his knowledge by looking at his creation. Let me give an illustration. God has made devices to keep fish and other aquatic animals alive in cold regions. As water grows colder, it gradually shrinks. But the amazing thing is that just before turning into ice, the water becomes light and expands. In the freezing cold, fish can easily live in the water of the lake. The surface of the lake may be frozen, but the water below is all liquid. If a very cold breeze blows, it is obstructed by the ice. The water below remains warm. Master, that God exists may be known by looking at the universe, but it is one thing to hear of God. It's quite another thing to see God, and still another thing to talk to God. Some have heard of milk, some have seen it, and some again have tasted it. You feel happy when you see milk, but you are nourished and strengthened when you drink it. You will get peace of mind only when you have seen God. You will enjoy bliss and gain strength only when you have talked to him. Shrish, we do not have time to pray to God. Master with a smile. Well, okay, that is true. Nothing comes to pass except at the right time. Going to bed, a child said to his mother, Mother, please wake me up when I feel the call of nature. My son, said the mother, the urge itself will wake you up. I don't have to wake you for that. It is all decided beforehand by God, what each one shall receive. A mother-in-law used to measure rice with a dish for her granddaughters-in-law, but it was not enough for them. One day the dish was broken, and that made the girls happy. But the mother-in-law said to them, Children, you may shout and dance, but I cannot measure the rice without the palm, but I can measure the rice with the palm of my hand. To Shrish, surrender everything. Surrender everything at the feet of God. What else can you do? Give him the power of attorney. Let him do whatever he thinks best. If you rely on a great man, he will never injure you. It is no doubt necessary to practice spiritual discipline, but there are two kinds of aspirants. The nature of the one kind is like that of a young monkey, and the nature of the other kind is like that of a kitten. The young monkey, with great exertion, somehow clings to its mother. Likewise, there are some aspirants who think that in order to realize God, They must repeat his name a certain number of times. They must meditate on him for a certain period of time. They must practice a certain amount of austerity. An aspirant of this kind makes his own efforts to catch hold of God. But the kitten of itself cannot cling to its mother. It lies on the ground and it cries, mew, mew. It leaves everything to its mother. The mother cat sometimes puts it on a bed, sometimes on the roof behind a pile of wood. She carries the kitten in her mouth hither and thither. The kitten doesn't know how to cling to the mother. Likewise, there are some aspirants who cannot practice spiritual discipline by calculating about jopam or the period of meditation. All that they do is cry to God with yearning hearts. God hears their cry and cannot keep himself away. He reveals himself to them. At noon, the host wished to feed the master and the devotees. Sri Ramakrishna was smilingly pacing the room. Now and then he exchanged a few words with the musician. All right. So we'll stop there for today.